A dark horse wins the Calvin Ridley sweepstakes. The Tennessee Titans swoop in and steal the wide receiver from Jacksonville. We're breaking that down on today's Locked On NFL. Let's roll.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tyler Rowland, local expert from Locked On Titans, here with my co-host, Alex Clancy, local expert from Locked On Cardinals. Thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Alex, we got big-time breaking news in the NFL, of course, right after we recorded the episode. Calvin Ridley will be signing with the Tennessee Titans on a 4-year, $92 million deal, a big-time deal, probably the second biggest deal of free agency so far behind Kirk Cousins in terms of buzz and how exciting it is. And obviously for me, as someone who covers the Tennessee Titans, this is something that's very exciting. The Titans desperately needed wide receivers, but there are some risks with this deal as well. But Alex, I'll let you talk about some of the risks because I'm going to take a moment here and talk about why this is a smart move for the Tennessee Titans. Number one, the Tennessee Titans had one of the worst wide receiver rooms in the NFL. So adding Calvin Ridley to DeAndre Hopkins with the ability to use pick 7 or pick 38 on another top-tier wide receiver in this draft, you can change that room overnight. You have Will Levis on a rookie contract. It makes sense to support your quarterback, your young quarterback, as best as possible. So not only you can get the best out of him, but you can get an answer on whether he's your quarterback for the long term or not. Not only that, but Calvin Ridley, still a very good player. He had a 71% success rate against man coverage last year, an 80% success rate against zone coverage, had some struggles with press coverage, but overall a guy who still is an elite separator, who can get open at all three levels of the field. So that makes sense within the Tennessee Titans' new modern offense under Brian Callahan. From a contract standpoint, 4 years, $92 million. $23 million per year sounds like a lot, and it is, but right now Calvin Ridley is like the 10th highest paid wide receiver in terms of annual value. He's the 10th highest paid receiver in terms of overall guarantees, which is about $50 million on the contract. That sounds like a lot, but there are a ton of wide receivers that are going to be paid here in the near future. Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins. All of these guys are going to get paid more money than Calvin Ridley. So it reminds me of the Christian Kirk deal where everyone was like, whoa, Christian Kirk got so much money. And then a couple other wide receivers got paid, and it was like, oh, I guess Christian Kirk isn't making all that much money. So right now, Calvin Ridley is getting Michael Pittman Jr., Terry McLaurin money. And I think although he is, 30 years old, with the being out of football for a year and a half with the suspension, I just think that he's got more tread on his tires than maybe other 30-year-old wide receivers would. So that is why I think it's a good deal for the Tennessee Titans. And you steal him away from Jacksonville, and now Jacksonville has to pay a third-round pick for having Calvin Ridley for one season. So you're stealing him away from them as well. Those are the reasons why I obviously, as someone who covers the Titans, think this is a great deal for them. But there is some public pushback. Alex, can you tell me why you like this deal, or maybe why you don't like this deal as much as I do?
It's a brain bender. Most out of the woodwork deals are, unless it's like unless he signed with the Chiefs or something great where it's like, oh my God, like this to most of the NFL landscape doesn't really matter. But to the teams that it does matter to, it matters a lot. And when you look at the AFC South, it was looked at as kind of the forgotten division. You didn't really have to be over 500. The AFC South and NFC South are kind of one and the same for the last couple years. Everybody was waiting for Trevor Lawrence to take over the reins, and he just hasn't. And then it's kind of open with Ryan Tannehill, and they moved on to Will Levis. The deal itself, I think, is fantastic for Tennessee. The questions surrounding it, though, are grave. We haven't seen him play more than 2 years in a row in a long time. Okay. He had a case of the dropsies last year from time to time. Okay. He didn't know where he was on the field. Like, if you had Calvin Ridley or Trevor Lawrence in fantasy football, there were myriad times where Calvin Ridley had 1 foot out in the back of the end zone on a touchdown catch. So there's just these weird things that happened last year. Maybe it's a one-off.
Can I speak to that, though? I think that might be a product of being out of football for a year and a half.
Maybe.
Like, people talk about the ACL and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a year and a half to come back from ACL. The second year back, they're always a much better player. Well, I think you could say with Calvin Ridley, he still had 76 catches, 1,000 yards. Like, he's probably going to be a better player this year than he was last year because he's now he's back in the momentum and in the swing of playing NFL football. That is my two-tone glasses, of course, from the Tennessee perspective. But I think there's some merit there as well. Understood.
Now, the one thing, like, this now puts immediate pressure on Will Levis.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it does.
So this isn't an experiment. You know what? They'll be okay for a couple of years. They'll win 7 or 8 games. They'll pick in the top 15. Maybe they'll get lucky, and maybe trade up and draft a quarterback. This is immediately Will Levis must perform next year. And it'll be easier for him to perform because he'll have outside talent that's not DeAndre Hopkins. I think DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley in kind of a thunder and lightning kind of scenario is going to be great.
Yes.
DeAndre Hopkins works very well with other star wide receivers. He's going to get his. There's going to be 40 targets per game probably to these two guys, and they're both going to eat. It's going to be fine in that respect. But Tyler, that offensive line better be good. Tony Pollard better be good. And Will Levis better be good and not just average next year, or they're going to look at that money and they're going to be like, what the hell is Rand Carthen doing? Signing a guy with Will Levis not being where he needs to be.
Yeah, well, there's obvious risk there. Yeah, you're 100% right. If the deal doesn't work out, obviously it's going to be bad. I mean, the deal doesn't work out. That's what we're talking about. But, you're paying him a lot of money. We got to wait for the full contract details to come out to really know exactly how much money it is, because Mike Evans got 2 years, $50 million, and then it was like, oh, it's 2 years, $41 million. Oh, okay. All right. That makes more sense. So we'll see. This is the most expensive that the contract is going to look. It's only going to drop in how expensive it looks as we get more information about it. But yeah, I mean, he is going to be 30 years old. He's not the most physical guy, struggles with press coverage. You're right. Hasn't played 2 full seasons in a row in quite some time. So I understand the trepidation there. It's all very valid, all very real concerns that the Titans have to deal with. But I think they needed to make this move. And I think once we see some other guys get paid at that position, it's going to be less of a sticker shock,
Tyler, $25 million isn't a lot of money in contracts nowadays. Doesn't matter the position.
Right.
Like pass rushers, like the top guaranteed money in contracts, I believe all top 8 are all defensive players. Okay. Wide receivers are arguably the most important offensive position, probably outside of left tackle and quarterback. And the fact that he's getting for $25 million, there's probably an out after the second year in some capacity or restructurability. They're not stupid. He's not giving them $50 million and saying, you know what, the dead cap hit because they're doing 7 void years is going to be $60 million in 3 years. It's not going to be the case. So while it's a sticker shock, it's because $50 million is a lot to us. It's not a lot to NFL organizations and the salary cap. And what did you say? Well, and this is going to be a little precursor into our conversation later because we are just recording this segment again. Tyler has some very important insight into cap percentage, not the actual number itself, the percentage of the available cap space utilized for one player.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And look, I'll tell you guys right now, listening, the show is going to sound a little wonky. We recorded a whole show, then the Calvin Ridley news hit, but you're getting the most up-to-date information here on the Locked On NFL podcast. So although the rest of the episode may sound a little weird at little bits and points and times, just know that we wanted to make sure that we served you guys and got you the most instant reaction that you could possibly get. So we're going to move forward. We're going to talk about big losers in free agency, big winners in free agency. Excited to dive into those topics right now. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the best place to buy tickets. I know personally, I've purchased a lot of tickets on Game Time at this point, not only to sporting events like baseball, basketball, football, but also concerts. They have comedy, they have theater events, and the best part about Game Time is all the features. They have killer last-minute deals like their zone deals and their flash deals. They have all-in prices, so you actually know what you're going to pay for your tickets before you buy. You get an accurate view from your seat, so you really know what you're going to be looking at when you sit down. It's absolutely fantastic. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alex, like I said, we're going to start with the losers. Before we do, thank you for making the Locked On NFL podcast your first listen each and every day. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My big loser out of the gate, I said it, I think it's a disaster in Dallas. All right, we heard Jerry Jones say a couple of weeks ago that he was all in this year. And with the contract status of Dak Prescott, I mean, the Cowboys went out and got a long snapper. I mean, they have basically done nothing. They lost Tony Pollard. They have made no improvements to the team. And really, for me, okay, I get that they're being patient, but Jerry Jones literally said this team is all in for this offseason and for this year. And it's like the opposite of that. I mean, a lot of people probably saw that Skip Bayless tweet, all in, comma, very important comma there. And I won't say the back half of that tweet. But yeah, I mean, Dallas Cowboys fans are fair to be upset, promised all in, and they've literally done nothing. So I think it's a disaster in Dallas. That's my first big loser.
You know, for somebody who said they were going to go all in, you know, it's troubling that, you know, the antithesis of that is happening, as you mentioned. I feel bad for Dak. You know, I know he's getting a lot of money. I know he's going to get a lot of money. I know the reason they're having to do what they're doing or lack thereof is because he's going to be getting a lot of money. What happens with Tyron Smith is going to be fascinating. As of now, we don't know. But it's him and CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson. Like, that's the plan. They didn't sign Derrick Henry because it was too much money. Jerry Jones, right. This is the worst time to be getting cheap with your pocketbook when it's been the opposite of what you've done since Des Bryant got his big deal years ago. The opposite of that. And it doesn't matter. You draft a guy, Leighton Vander Esch, here's your contract. DeMarcus Lawrence, here's your balloon contract. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I agree with you on that one, Tyler Rowland. What's number two?
You have another one.
You know, for me, and it's tough because, like, the only reason why I'm going to say this team is because this now elderly man, by NFL standards, is the new age Sam Bradford. He's the guy who comes in, he won more games than Sam Bradford did, but you know how the Kirk Cousins story ends. What is the definition of insanity, Tyler? Doing the same thing, expecting different results. He is the dictionary definition of the definition of insanity. And the Atlanta Falcons put themselves in a situation, they don't have a high-powered offensive mind at head coach. For Kirk Cousins really to succeed, it's got to be more than just having a young trio of receivers and they added a fourth, of skill position players with Kyle Pitts. I don't buy it. I know the defense was very underrated last year. I understand that. I know that when you look at the trajectory for that team on the offense, you need a veteran. You can have a veteran guy who can do what Kirk Cousins did, especially before he tore his Achilles last year. He was the best quarterback numbers-wise in football. Tyler, I don't understand why people keep paying him $100 million guaranteed. Right. I don't understand it.
I understand. And you're worried about Atlanta. I get it. I am not going to say that just because I want to see what Zach Robinson can do as the offensive coordinator. Maybe he can continue that Shanahan-style system around Kirk Cousins, but he's an older quarterback. He's not a long-term option for Atlanta, and they gave him a lot of money. For me, my next loser is the team that Kirk Cousins came from, and that's the Minnesota Vikings. Look, they went out and got Jonathan Grenard to replace Danielle Hunter, younger player, little bit cheaper in the short term. I understand that. But who is playing quarterback now? Who is playing quarterback for them? They brought in Sam Darnold. I mean, that's not an answer. I'm sorry, anybody can talk themselves into Sam Darnold if they want to, but this guy is not a franchise quarterback. He's not a long-term starter. And who else are they going to get? J.J. McCarthy? They're going to get Michael Penix? Like, quarterbacks that I don't necessarily believe are franchise long-term starters either. So they put themselves in a strange position, coming off a down year and a disappointing season, going into another year where the roster doesn't look very good. And again, it comes back to this. Justin Jefferson. They can say that they're not trading him all they want. But when he's out there trying to catch passes from Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy, and they are 4-8 in the middle of the season, is he really going to be like, yeah, I'm staying here? Absolutely not. So I think this has been misery in Minnesota is what I've deemed it. I think they are big losers in this early period of free agency.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The stuff it's so fun. The stuff with Jamar Chase, just tweeting cryptic things. Like, we're going to go back to dictionary definition of the one thing, the one ecosystem you build if you want, the antithesis of one ecosystem you build if you want to keep your star wide receiver. Like, these are the things you should not be doing if you want to keep your star wide receiver. So you bring in Aaron Jones, you've got, they've got a ready-made offense for a quarterback to come in and ball. I feel like draft pundits and just national media members are so burned by Sam Darnold during the draft process when he came out that they're trying to chase that feeling like, oh, he can still be great. And I
wasn't wrong.
Him getting $10 million, like, one little thing though, like, Andy Dalton got $10 million 2 years ago to be a backup. So just because he's getting $10 million doesn't mean he's going to start. It makes me wonder if Minnesota is going to move up heavily and throw away all future capital to draft a quarterback at 3 and see if New England, maybe, Jimmy Garoppolo got released. Maybe the Patriots just run it back with Jimmy G and Jacoby Brissett, and they move back out of the top 10 and get, the Trey Lance package to move back.
Yeah, well, I think that the Patriots, you look at their roster, I don't think they're going to be very good this year anyway, so they'll probably be in position to get a quarterback next year. I wanted to do one more quick loser, and I know I've been hammering on this team all season. I'm sorry, I just hate what the Washington Commanders have done here.
Really?
They went and got Austin Eckler. Yeah. Don't like it. Their big signings are Frankie Louvu and Dorrance Armstrong. Tyler Biadasz, I guess. 3 years, $30 million. Woo, man, like, you get the backup guard from Kansas City who's almost 28 already anyway. Marcus Mariota, no. Jeremy Chin is good, but he's a limited safety. Clelin Ferrell, they're one of the teams that has added the most players in free agency, and they haven't added anything that moves the needle or any long-term solution, maybe other than Frankie Louvu. They have no long-term solutions for their growing team. They missed out on Ben Johnson and Bobby Slowick. They ended up with Dan Quinn. Other than getting Adam Peters, that, in my opinion, they have whiffed on everything. So to give out one of the most amount of contracts in the NFL and your biggest signing is Frankie Louvu, what are you really doing here? You're not setting your team up for success. So I just hate what I've seen. A disaster in D.C. They're dead in Dallas, and it's misery in Minnesota. So those are my 3 big losers.
Yeah, and just one last thing before we pivot here to the winners. Washington had the most money to spend this offseason?
Yes.
Second most. I know they were top 3.
Yes.
They don't have a quarterback. Why would you go to a team? Yeah, why would you go to a team with a new head coach, a retread head coach, coordinators who don't jump off the page? You don't know who the running back will, until Austin Eckler signed, and they don't have great skill position players. And the defense, they've just done a fire sale on their defensive front. Yep. So what's the upside? And they play in the NFC East. You're going to have at least 3 primetime games before anything happens, and then if you sign some big name guys, it may be 4 if you play Dallas twice in primetime. That's a lot of pressure and a very unknown situation, regardless of how much you get paid. This episode of Locked On NFL Thursday is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim is of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer.
And Alex, I will let you start us off. Who is a big winner for you in free agency?
I mean, the Eagles just keep doing it. Now, here's the thing. Just like the Kirk Cousins story, this is what we see from the Eagles every year, just with different people wearing the uniforms. You haven't had the splash of Saquon Barkley. The discrepancy between offensive line play in New York and offensive line play in Philly last year was gargantuan. So the ability for him to create space or get space created for him is going to be really telling. And see, I mean, he could be the number one fantasy guy in 2024 if he's healthy. But when you look across the board, they just bolster. Excuse me. Every offseason they bolster, and it's just going to be a determination on if Nick Sirianni can lead them to over that next hump of Jalen Hurts can remove himself from the mini step back in 2023, namely in the latter part of the season, and thrust themselves into the NFC Championship / Super Bowl with this, star-studded roster with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith already there.
Yeah, Devontae Smith and Devontae Parker, who they also added, brought Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back. Bryce Huff, obviously a big addition. I'm with you there. I think Philadelphia added some key things. And the Saquon Barkley thing, I mean, 2 years, $26 million is basically what the contract is when they can get out of it. I don't think that's too crazy for Saquon. And when you have a team that's ready to go, that has good players in premium positions, you can afford to take a luxury like Saquon Barkley for Philadelphia. So, yeah, they added some good pieces. A big winner for me, though, I like what Houston has done here.
Yeah.
I don't think that it makes them a Super Bowl contender personally, but I think they added some good additions. With the performance of C.J. Stroud in year one, being on his rookie contract, it is time for Houston to go all in. Like, they need to go all in here. I like what they did. Adding Danielle Hunter, 2 years, $49 million. He's an older player at 30 years old. He's going to be 30 during the season, but you're going to get 2 years of high-level production from him during C.J. Stroud's rookie contract. I like adding Jeff Okudah, former first-round pick, for less than $5 million. They got Tommy Townsend, who's one of the best punters in the NFL, if not the best. The Azeez Al-Shire contract, not one of my favorites. I think they overpaid a little bit there for the linebacker. But getting Danico Autry, who had 11 sacks last year, for basically a 1 year, $10 million deal that can be 2 years, $20 million total if they want to. I think they're just adding pass rush. They're adding at good places that they need to. I don't think that they're, the 85 Bears on defense or anything like that, but I think that Houston's done a good job of using their money to add to the pass rush and to add to their defense where they really needed some help.
Yeah, Danielle Hunter, it's like these things that this is the third year of like a 5-year plan. Right. And it was supposed to be like a 7-year plan, but CJ Stroud worked out. Like that expedited it at least 1 calendar year. They had a couple good drafts before. They had Jalen Petrie and Derek Stingley. They had a couple sneaky drafts. They added a couple veteran spots. Dalton Schultz was very good for them last year. Nico Collins was a breakout star last year out of Michigan with CJ Stroud. Like they were putting up Madden on easy numbers. Noah Brown they brought back for another year who put up monster numbers. Tank Dell, because the quarterback and the wide receivers worked, they could allocate their funds everywhere else. Yep. Like all you have to do is just redo what you did last year with the 3 young receivers, Dalton Schultz, and then you upgraded Devin Singletary to Joe Mixon, and you bolstered your front 7 on defense. Like there for me, I think CJ Stroud will probably have a sophomore slump in some capacity. Otherwise, they're making the Super Bowl. Like it's listen.
No way.
It's Patrick Mahomes until it's not. Okay, that's my stamp here. But I put them in top 2.5 in the AFC with that defense if it's as stout and everybody stays healthy.
Yeah, I think they have an opportunity. At least they've given themselves that chance with what they have on that roster. The other big winner that I wanted to mention, and this is obviously off the beaten path a little bit here, but I just like what the Steelers have done.
Yeah.
I like taking that chance on Russell Wilson for $1.2 million. They bring in Patrick Queen, and like I was saying, the Patrick Queen contract is better than the Azeez Al-Shire contract that the Texans gave. And Patrick Queen is a way better player than Azeez Al-Shire, who I covered last year. So to get Patrick Queen for really a 1 year, $13, 1 year, $14 million deal, I mean, I think adding that, getting Russell Wilson, they just traded Deontay Johnson. I'm sure they have a plan there, and they're in a good spot in the draft to get somebody. They're on a lower level of like for me, but I like what the Steelers have done this offseason so far as well.
Yeah, and the one for me, and it's just because they got maybe the missing piece, is the Ravens. Okay, so they brought back Justin Madubuike. They gave him his big contract extension. Yep. Derrick Henry may be the missing piece for them because the Ravens are best when they're running the football. I'm sorry, Lamar Jackson truthers, when it comes down to it, Lamar Jackson cannot complete a 3rd and 8 when you absolutely need it. He just can't, and that's okay.
Playoffs, at least.
Yeah, I mean, he just can't. And you know what you could do against Kansas City? Run the ball 40 times. They had a pretty good run defense. All you do against Patrick Mahomes, because that's what everybody's doing, is how can you beat Patrick Mahomes? That's how they're building out their roster. The best way to beat Patrick Mahomes is be on offense on the field for 40 minutes out of 60. That's how you beat Patrick Mahomes. And the best way to do that is running the damn ball. They've got a bevy of running backs. Now with Keaton Mitchell as the change of pace guy, Derrick Henry is a high volume guy. And I think just like with Saquon Barkley, he's going to get a lot more room before first contact, you'd think, with the Baltimore offensive line aside from Tennessee. So I just think before Baltimore, that was the biggest move this offseason because that's maybe the missing piece they needed to get over the hump. So listen,
I hate to say it as a Tennessee Titans fan, of course, watching Derrick Henry, but it was a great fit and it does make a lot of sense for him.
That's all I got. You can take us out like normal, Tyler.
Yep. I love that. Yep. But it does make sense. I mean, regardless of what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, it's best to have a backup plan when you're dealing with him. But with that being said, that is going to do it for a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. I'm Tyler Rowland, host of Locked On Titans, here with Alex Clancy, host of Locked On Cardinals. As I tell you guys every single week, start your weekend early and stay safe out there.